again, we keep talking about references to prior movies. He walks into the Sutton household thinking he's just going to catch her in the shower, much like Miss Anders, a.k.a. Miss Octopussy. And what's fun right there is that he walks into the bathroom and she's not there, and she's in the closet behind him, loaded up the rock salt, ready to shoot him. Now, McCurds, let's get it out. You hate women. No. You hate weak women? I don't know. You don't. You don't like Stacey Sutton.
Now
you
I
don't
sit
like
back.
Stacey Sutton.
Watch you two.
You sexist. You just hate women
Nathan,
in general.
take a break.
You don't.
Just sit
I'll be
back,
honest.
just
After
enjoy this.
rewatching this
Go take a
movie,
dump.
I'll say this: I don't. She doesn't. I don't hate her as
Weak
much as I
women.
did as who's
Well,
a
she's
good,
got a
I'm getting
backstory
mixed up.
and
Good night,
everything,
Good night,
right?
Good head. It was a good night, right?
Good night. Yeah. Good night.
Sorry. Good night. Good head was Moonraker. I don't hate her as much as Good night, but I also don't think her performance is as bad. I do think that Tanya Roberts, it's really hard not to think of Tanya Roberts and not think of Midge from that 70s show, because her character is just very dumb and just a blonde.
I
Essentially.
really never watched the show. I mean,
love
I've seen a
the
couple
show. Like, that
episodes. I
70s
know
show is
you're
one of my
like a big
favorite
fan of it.
shows.
So
Yeah.
like, I don't have that in my head. Okay, that's funny. No, hang on. That's funny though. You talking about though. What you talked about was like casting for a purpose, right? And it is a reality that certain casting directors and directors will be like,
Yeah.
let's bring this person in who in people's minds, like it's like putting Roger Moore in Cannonball Run. It's like, because he was already James Bond.
Yeah.
Let's
You're saying
cast
like
with a
putting
purpose.
her because she was this Bond character in that. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
let me point. Okay, I'll say this. This is my little bit about Tanya Roberts. Rewatching this movie, I don't hate her as much as I thought I did. I don't think she's that bad. I think she does fall into the category of bad Bond girls, but she's not like the worst of the. She's not the bottom of the barrel for me now. I think it's just mainly what it is it has more to do with performance and whatever character or job you associate with that performance. So if you have a character like Miss Goodhead, who seems like a competent woman who knows how to do her job, she's at CIA, but she's also a scientist. Like, she seems like she can perform. Her performance is like, oh yeah, I could see her being a scientist. She seems like a smart person. Scott's falling asleep. But then you get a character, and we'll see this in other. We'll see this in other
He's
movies later on.
fantasizing about
We'll see
time.
this.
Oh, God.
But my point is, you'll see this in other movies down the road. But you'll see characters, what those characters are, their occupations are, and what they're supposed to do, and then the way that they're performed don't necessarily match up. It's not every Bond girl, it's some Bond girls, and I think those are the ones that tend to be on the weaker sides. I should note that Tanya Roberts was nominated for a Razzie, and if you don't know what the Razzies are, they're like the anti-Oscars. The worst movies.
What?
She was nominated for a Razzie for this particular movie. I don't think she's terrible, but she has her moments, but it's like...
Okay. Here's the thing. My question to you is, because so far you have a track record of not liking any Bond girl who isn't perfect. She isn't completely competent. So let me just say this. When it comes to the Bond girls of this particular movie, you have Stacey Sutton, she's just a geologist, and she's put in these incredible circumstances where suddenly she's working beside, the bulldog of the British government, and suddenly expected to do crazy things like survive an elevator fire and then drive a fire truck. But she is smart. She's clearly smart, but she
And she has she has one really good scene.
She says a lot of times she'll say, "James," like she yells for James a lot.
James! Oh, James.
But that's because she's like put in these extraordinary circcircumstances, and again,
She's in
it's
a
like
burning elevator.
It's out of fashion for a woman to scream for a man's help today. But this is James Bond we're talking about. James Bond is highly competent in dire circumstances.
I'm saying
but hang on. But then Stacey though is just forced into these things where she's like she's like the definition of a sheltered child. She's like, yeah, my grandfather was rich. My daddy was rich, and then I was expected to take over the company, so I went to school. Like, she hasn't been through anything like this. She even wears high heels to the city hall as she normally does.
Mm-hmm.
And then that leads to her having high heels through the end of the movie, which is like the worst thing to be wearing, but that's just what she had on at the time because she didn't expect to run into Max Zorin. At the other end of that, though, is Mayday and Jenny Flex. Like, you have these chicks who, you know, whether they're genetically modified or not, they are like highly capable and could just kill you with their pinky or whatever. So my argument every time you and I go into it about whether or not this Bond girl is good or that Bond girl is good, my whole thing is like, not all of them need to be like super crazy, ultra capable. I mean, your arguments with Goodnight were totally valid. My whole counter argument was she's just unlucky. She's like competent, but then super unlucky. Whereas with this, she's competent, but she's like, I'm way in over my head. I don't know. I just thought this guy was a writer for the newspaper.
And I'm not disagreeing with you because, again, like, this is rewatching the film because I've watched all these movies, you know, and like you and I have watched these movies dozens of times. It's just like rewatching it this time, keeping that in mind. I'm like, she really isn't as bad as I imagined when I first was watching the movie. She has her moments.
She even physically fights Zorin at the end, and she knocks out Scarpine.
Yeah. She's not but there's times when I'm like, not the best actress, but again, like, the character's written well enough that I'm like, I don't completely hate her when she's on screen. She's not my favorite part of the movie, but it's like just kind of like, it's fine. It works. I don't hate it. Versus Goodnight, where it's just like, I wanted to gouge my eyeballs out every time I saw her.
Just kill her.
You know, and then there's times when, you know, who was it in, you know, as much as like Nans didn't like, who was it? Tiffany Case in Diamonds Are Forever. It's just she's somewhat obnoxious, competent but obnoxious. This movie, it's like she's somewhere in the middle. It's like she doesn't really bother me that much. After watching it a second time, I'm like, she gets one like clear scene that she's like has something to do with geology, where you're like, okay, she understands her job.
If they go off, both faults move at once.
When we get later down the road, though, it just really comes down to performance and can they play that occupation off well enough that you believe it. And like, there are two, I think you and I agree, there are two performances down the road that you both are like, yeah,
I'm a nuclear physicist.
Yeah.
The single point of her strength in this movie is pulling a $5 million check out of her bag, ripping it up.
It's a good moment.
They have. I'd sell everything and live in a tent before I give up.
Forget the rest. Forget physical strength. It's psychological.
That's also when she falls in love with Bond.
And the way you handle those men.
Well, there's baboons could come back.
I hope not.
Again, she's in high heels and she's kind of dainty, but at the same time, when it's between her grandfather's ashes and helping out Bond, she smashes it on the guy's head, and like that's a good moment for her. And then she's like very feminine, but then she always comes through.
My response is, okay.
I don't know why you hate women so much, McCurdy.
Okay.
Anyway, okay, guys.
Moving on.